Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. I'm your host Chef Andy as usual, and today I'm going to be taking you through a beautiful dish. I'm going to be showing you a nice, beautiful, inspired Moroccan dish. We're going to be making lamb skewers. I'm going to be serving those with some potato wedges, which I'm going to show you how to do. So I'll just start by introducing my ingredients. So from the front here, I've got some garam masala, I've got some cayenne pepper, some paprika, and some beautiful minced ginger. I've got some fresh coriander there and some salt. I've got some stock powder there, some eggs, and some beautiful minced lamb. And I've also got some potatoes here that we peeled earlier and just a little bit of olive oil. So without further ado, we're going to take a short break. Do take this chance to grab your pens and papers. And when we come back, we're just going to go straight into it. See you after the short break. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We took a short commercial break and now we're back. I'm just about to start showing you how to make a beautiful lamb kebab from home. We're going to be serving it with potato wedges, but do feel free to serve it whichever way that makes you happy. I personally like mine with fries. And now what I'm going to do is I'm first going to work on my kebab mixture. Remember, you want to first of all get your mixture well mixed together. You want to give it a few minutes to rest so that you can really get those flavors really incorporated. And then you're just going to now assemble the kebabs and cook them directly. So without further ado, I'm just going to grab a bowl quickly. And we're also going to be cooking our spices just a little bit. Remember, the beautiful thing about working with spices, you can actually be able to fry them a little bit, or rather heat them a little bit on a pan. You actually manage to activate the flavors to really bring the flavors up, and then you actually pour the mixture back into your lamb and actually mix it. The particular reason for this is because kebabs cook from the outside in, you might not be able to taste all the flavors if you mix them in bland without actually reheating them a little bit. So it is crucial for that particular process that you actually cook the spices a little bit before incorporating them into your mince. Right. So I'm just going to start by reheating our pan. Just gonna give it a nice wipe. Always remember to make sure if you're going to be drying any spices on your pan, make sure it's dry. Remember, any moisture on your pan or any oil might really change the texture and the flavors of the spices, so you really want it to be completely dry. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab my garam masala, my cayenne pepper, and we're gonna reserve the paprika and the ginger for later. And I'm also going to be using some of this beautiful stock powder. So I'm just going to pour that on the pan here. So always give your pan just a few seconds to heat up before you start the process. Remember, you want to heat them as quick as possible and in the shortest time possible. So we're just going to pour everything right on our pan. And remember, you're not really trying to darken the mixture in general. As soon as you get the aromas coming through, do take it off the heat. You don't want to go too far, because as soon as you go too far, you actually get a bitter taste from your spices. So this is something I recommend. Please don't leave your pan unattended. Just hold your pan over the heat, give it a few shakes, about just a minute and a half, take it out and just continue with your process. So you can be able to just get the cumin is just starting to come up. So the cumin is actually one of the ingredients in the garam masala, incorporated with some dana jeera and a few other spices like cardamom and cinnamon. So you can actually be able to get all these flavors coming through. And another reason for doing this as well, ladies and gentlemen, you may have spices that have been sitting in your pantry for too long, And what happens is when they sit there for too long, they might actually start to become damp. And what happens is they lose their pungency. So this is actually the best way to reactivate your spices before using them. Right, so this is now nice and ready. We're just going to pour that out into our bowl. Probably going to scoop that bit that's remaining. Right, so easy as that. And now to that, we're just going to add our mince, our minced lamb. So particularly for lamb, it might be a little tricky to be able to find minced lamb available in your regular outlets. I always recommend if you go to your butcher and you mention that you're looking for minced meat or minced lamb, just pick some beautiful cuts from wherever they have, ask them to mince it for you fresh, and you can actually be able to make it as I did. For this particular mince, I just decided to chop it really finely with a knife, which is also another option you could use if you already have the meat in your fridge and maybe it's already too late and you can't really go back to your butcher and mince it. You can actually take your time and just mince it with a knife. It'll still give you a fairly good mince to work with. So we're going to add our paprika to that mixture. We're also going to add a bit of about a tablespoon of minced ginger, and I'm gonna add about a teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna add a bit of that stock powder. I'm using stock powder because I really want to incorporate a bit of earthiness to it, a bit of richness to it. So I'm going to start by first mixing the mince. Remember, as I said, it does take a few seconds for the mince to actually start absorbing the flavors from the spices we were just heating off on the pan. So it's always good to give it a mix and give it a few seconds before you start rolling it out. Right, we can now set this aside. And to that, I'm also going to be adding some chopped coriander. So I'm using chopped fresh coriander. Parsley also works for this dish, but I'm actually going to avoid using parsley today because we are actually going to be looking at a particular flavor, and working with coriander and parsley for this dish might contradict. But if you do feel like you want to go the extra mile and add some parsley to your kebab mixture, it's also allowed. So very simple technique of chopping your dhania or your coriander. All I do is I just grab the bunches as they are, and I basically just fold them halfway. And then all you do is just roll them on your board. Just try and get a bit of shape there. And all you're going to do is just let your knife do the rest of the work for you. So I'm just going to roughly chop that. Right, and we're gonna add that to our kebab mixture. And last but not least, also going to be incorporating just a little bit of black pepper just for seasoning. And now all we are going to do is give our mixture another thorough mix. So you're probably going to be mixing this for maybe 4 to 5 minutes continuously. This is just to make sure your spices really coat your meat really well. And I always insist when you're doing your mixing, always give it a few turns with your spoon. Turn your bowl about 90 degrees and continue the same process. This actually allows you to try and incorporate the ingredients a little more evenly. And I also insist, also use your spoon. Try and also break up the meat while you're mixing it, just to make sure you've actually managed to mix the mixture really well, really through. Right, so simple as that. So now something I hadn't mentioned, for this particular recipe, you are going to need some skewers. I would have used this, but I wanted to show you the skewers particularly for those that might actually be thinking of doing this on a grill outside, or if you are looking for an option to do them on a barbecue. The bamboo sticks really do really well. But one thing to remember is before you actually assemble your kebabs and use your skewers on them, always take a bit of time and give them time to soak. Give them a bit of time to really absorb the water, and that way once they hit the grill, they're not just going to start flaming. A lot of people have actually had issues when trying to make kebabs on the grill and you have your skewers burning out and it ruins the presentation. So one thing to remember, let them sit in a bit of water before assembly, and this is going to avoid them from catching fire. Right. So we're just going to start assembling our kebabs. And I always insist, go with about a golf ball size. So remember, the skewers are really, you are going to be assembling them onto the stick, and they actually have to be really thin, so don't take too much mixture at once. As I mentioned to you, a golf ball size really works well, so I'm just going to form a few balls from the mixture, and then I'm going to take you through the process of assembling your skewer, or your kebab rather. So the same recipe can really go well if you have some chicken that you have left over, or you have some beef that you're not really going to be using for anything. So the same recipe, if you think of alternating the meat, particularly if you want to go with chicken, if you want to go with fish, it actually works the same way, but I insist, do actually have a look around, do find a few recipes that you can refer to. Do a bit of research before you go ahead and try it out, because particularly with meats, you don't get meat having the same texture. Fish is more moist, so it might be a little trickier to get that to form into kebabs. But any minced meat or any minced lamb or any minced chicken definitely will be a good alternative. Right, so I'm just going to finish rolling up that last bit of meat in the bowl. So I've been working with about 450 to 500 grams of minced lamb. So this should be able to give you about 6 kebabs. But you can actually make them bigger, as I said. It all depends on how you plan to serve your portions. If you're going to be serving them bigger, you're probably not going to be portioning them the same way. You're probably going to use a bigger quantity. But for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to make it easier for everyone. Right, so we're gonna get rid of that bowl. And we're just going to go into assembly, but first we're gonna get our grill on. We're gonna give it a few seconds to just reheat. So I'll be working with a griddle. If you do have a regular frying pan or non-stick pan, it really works well as well. If you do have some extra time and you think you're trying to cook it a little slower, I insist you can actually be able to do this on the grill as I'm doing now. You can also just set them on a baking tray and do them in the oven. Just as I said, always look around, look for some recipes. They will give you a bit of guidelines on how to do so. So for this particular one, we're going to be doing it on the griddle, but you can do your research and you should be able to find something that works. So I'm just going to start assembling our skewers. All I'm going to do is I'm going to just compress this into a more sausage cylindrical shape, and be sure to also continue pressing it as you roll it out. Remember that there could be a bit of air pockets in there which you should actually be working on trying to remove. So always give it a firm squeeze before getting it onto your stick. So that's about right. And all you're going to do now is slide your skewer right to the center there. And all I do is, I actually like to work on the board, and all I do is I just evenly get it to one particular thickness. Remember, it's particular that you get the thickness right because you do want it to cook evenly. Right, so it's about done. And I'm just going to do the same for 2 more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you one particular version that should be served on a stick, and I'm also going to show you a second version that I'm going to be coating with some egg, which is a more traditional kebab that most of us know, and it's more of the local one that we're used to finding in most of the eat-outs around Nairobi. So as I said, always take your time to try and make sure it's evenly thick right through to the end. Remember one particular thing to remember when you're cooking meat, you always want it to be as uniform in shape as possible, because you are going to be cooking them together. It is crucial that you check on the thickness and check on the way you actually form your kebabs, because you do want them to cook evenly right through. Right, so I'm just going to squeeze that last third one. We're going to slide our skewer right in there. We're just going to finish that off on our chopping board. Right, so as our griddle heats up, I'm just going to show you what we're going to do with the other 3 bowls that we have. So in a bowl, I'm just going to crack some organic eggs, just regular organic eggs. Right, and I'll also just give it a bit of a mix with my whisk. Right, that should be about right. So particularly with kebabs, a lot of influence from Morocco. I do actually like to refer to Moroccan recipes for this particular dish. One thing I like about Moroccan cuisine is they're very, very diverse with spices. So if you do have a chance to do some research, I would always recommend try and look at the Moroccan recipes. They are really, really good, and they're very helpful, especially giving you a more better know-how of most of the spices that we are working with. So to the griddle, I'm just going to drizzle a bit of olive oil. Be generous with it, because remember, with a griddle, the oil actually sits right at the bottom of your pan and of your pan, and what happens is the meat will not be directly touching the oil. It's just going to be right above. Remember, with a griddle, we've got the indentation in the pan, so it is particular that you give a nice generous quantity of oil. Right, so I'm just going to finish those off slightly just to give them a nice shape. Right, and these we're just going to go straight on and place them on our pan. And as I said, always take your time to continue, just always give it a nice squeeze before it goes onto the pan. Remember, this is the final stage of assembly. And particularly what happens with kebabs is if your mixture is not strong enough when it hits the pan, we might actually have an instance whereby your kebab breaks apart and you can't actually, it won't actually look as appealing when you serve it. So always give it a bit of a chance to actually, really set it on the stick before it hits your hot pan. So we're just going to go with those 3, and I'll show you what we're going to do with the remainder. So something particular with working with lamb, always be particular to find a nice cut of lamb with a bit of fat. The reason for this is lamb is particularly a very tender meat, but the fat from the lamb is really, really tasty. It does carry a bit of juice and a bit of flavor. So always make sure to have just a little bit of fat when you go out there to purchase your lamb. Remember, just a little bit of fat to your mixture is good, and it actually makes a difference with your kebabs. Right, so we're just going to grill those, and we're going to be looking for a nice golden color. And as always insisted, always try and give them a turn as they continue cooking. This just avoids them from overcooking on one side. So we're just going to constantly keep turning those around as they continue cooking. And to the rest of the mixture, I'm just going to grab a pan. And we're just going to set that on the side. Right, now I'm just going to get another pan going. And now I'm just going to go in and show you a different technique of making a kebab. So this one particularly, we're going to be coating it in some egg. So for that, I will need an extra plate. So for this particular ones, we're not going to be putting the skewers in. We're just going to be cooking them as they are. As I said, it's always good to use support of your board. It actually does help you to really stretch out your kebab. Right, so very, very easy technique. So just the same way we did the first one, we're gonna do the same with the second one. And as I said, always pay attention to your kebabs. Remember, they actually cook really, really quick. So it is important that you keep checking on them and keep turning them just to make sure you get an even color and an even cooking all around. So those are going to be going for about another 4 to 5 minutes. That should give us enough time to get this on our pan. So our pan is smoking, it's nice and hot, so I'm just going to go in with a bit of olive oil. Just be generous with it. So I'm just going to use my board. As I said, the board always gives you a nice stable area to work on, and it actually allows you to work a little faster. And we're going to do the same with this third piece. So simple as that, ladies and gentlemen. Right, so basically from this particular point now, all you're going to do is you're just going to drop your kebab in some egg, and you're just going to turn it a few times. I always go 3 times right around it. And always just give it a bit of a chance to just drain the excess, and that goes straight onto your pan. And we're just going to do the same thing with the rest. Last but not least, for our third piece, and as I said, be very generous with the egg. Remember, it's a kebab. You do want it to really get the flavor and get the appeal, get the color, get the look. So always just be generous with the egg drizzle, but don't forget to actually allow the excess to actually drain off before it goes onto the pan. Otherwise, you might actually end up with a kebab with a bit of an omelette around it. Right, I'm just going to quickly rinse my hands. And we're just going to run this side and check on our skewers. Right, so those are now nice and beautiful. Those are now nice and golden. Just going to set those aside on our plates. Right, and I'm just going to switch off my heat on that side. So we already have our first portions that are done. We're now just going to continue cooking the other 3 that we threw in here earlier, or and what you need to watch out for as well is always make sure there's a nice layer of oil around them. Remember, this is a more healthier way of cooking your kebab. A lot of times I've actually insisted that you can actually just drop them into your deep fryer if you do have one. But for reasons that we're trying to I'm also trying to show you about being economic and also trying to save time. You can actually be able to do them on the pan and just finish them off in the oven. Right, so we're just going to turn those around. So remember, for this particular stage, all we are doing is getting a bit of color onto the kebabs. Right, and as those continue, I'm just going to get rid of that. So very, very simple, as I said, something you can be able to do just a little earlier than dinner. So this is something you could just probably start doing just before dinner time. Right, so I'm also going to show you the potato wedges. So we're just going to start by chopping up our potatoes. So I'm not going to chop everything. I'm just going to do about 3 or 4 pieces. So also a very, very simple technique of doing your wedges. So this we're just going to coat them with a bit of seasoning. We're going to throw them in the oven, and we're just going to allow them to really cook slowly. So I'm just going to use my bowl, my big bowl. And all I'm going to do is add a bit of salt to that. I'm going to add a bit of the stock seasoning. And I'm also going to just chop just about a small sprig of fresh coriander. Now all you're going to do is give that a mix, but before we do that, let's just come back to our kebabs. We're just going to give that a final turn. And as you can see, nice beautiful golden color coming through. So as I said, kebabs do quick, they actually cook really well, especially if you have a nice beautiful mince. If you have a good balance of fat to meat, it actually allows the kebab to cook a little faster because the fat will absorb a little more, will absorb the heat a little faster. Right, so our second set is also done. We're just going to move those onto a plate as well. You can also turn the heat at that stage. All I'm going to do is set these aside. We're just going to allow them to cool off right on our counter. So back to the potato wedges. So in there I have a bit of stock seasoning, a bit of chopped fresh coriander, and I'm just going to add now a bit of olive oil. All you want to do at this point is just mix that through really well. So this particular technique of making wedges, you can actually be able to do the same even in a fryer. But one thing to remember is if you are going to be frying this, you might actually want to reserve some oil for it, because remember, as soon as you actually use the oil, you might have a lot of seasoning in the oil and you might not be able to fry anything else in there. So this is why I'm actually baking them. Baking, first of all, is a nicer, healthier and quicker option to use for cooking. Right, so now that's nicely mixed through. I'm just going to quickly grab a baking tray and I'm just going to drizzle a bit of olive oil. This is just to allow it to not stick. And all we are going to do now is transfer our potatoes here, and these are going to be going in the oven at 180 degrees. We're going to be cooking them for about 20 to 25 minutes. And this should actually be about done before we come back from our second break. Alright, so easy as that. So this is just going to go straight into the oven here. So this was already preset at 180 degrees, as you can see. I'm just going to set my timer for 25 minutes. So I'm using elements only. I don't really have a fan for this oven. It's not a convectional oven. So we're going to leave them there for about 20 to 25 minutes. We're also going to take a short commercial break and clean up this mess. And when we come back, I'm just going to show you we're going to take this out and see what they look like. And I'm going to take you straight into the plating process. See you after a short Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I have definitely enjoyed my break, and now we are back to just finish off this beautiful dish. Now, before we took the break, we had some beautiful potato wedges that went into our oven, and now they're just about done. And now I'm just going to take them out, and we can just go ahead and plate. All right. Those are looking beautiful. They're nicely colored. They're nicely golden. Just definitely the color we were looking for. Now I'm just going to show you a very, very simple way to complete and present your dish. So I have some ingredients here that I'm going to be incorporating for that. And for that, I'm going to be chopping a bit of mint here, which I'm going to mix with a bit of plain yogurt. And these are just basically sauces you can serve on the side with your kebabs. Alternatively, you could just serve it with whatever makes you happy nonetheless. Right, so very, very simple. Just a few sprigs of mint. Then to that, I will also add some plain yogurt. So this is just plain regular yogurt. And then to that, I'll add just a pinch of salt. And last but not least, a bit of black pepper. And all you do is give that a mix. Right, very, very simple. You could give that a taste. Perfect. Right, so we're just going to go straight on to plating. I'm first of all going to start with these kebabs, the ones that we did second. So very, very simple technique. All I'm going to do is just take a couple of those beautiful golden brown wedges that we did in the oven. So remember, these have been in there for about 20 to 25 minutes. 180 degrees, as I mentioned. For those who missed out on what went into this, we only seasoned them with a bit of stock powder, a bit of fresh chopped coriander, and a bit of salt. And last but not least, a bit of oil. We just mix it together and threw them in the oven. So very, very simple technique. As I always say, I try to incorporate my easiest and most convenient way of presentation, but you're not limited to sticking with this particular design. Always try your own way, whatever makes you feel happy. So I'm just going to use my spoon and spread that around. And then we're just going to move those onto our plate like that. Right, very, very simple. So that's just one technique of plating. Now, I'm just going to show you a different technique you could use to plate the same, but now this is totally a different technique. This is for the skewers particularly. So to that, I'm just going to lay some tomato wedges there. So this is just basically something to enhance, just to accompany the dish. As I said, you are not limited to this. You can actually even make a salad. You can serve it with whatever makes you happy in particular. All we're going to do is just put a nice big bunch of fresh coriander in there. The reason why I'm serving them as they are and I'm not chopping them up is because a nice little bit of a bite from a coriander leaf while it's fresh, especially with kebabs, it really refreshes your palate and it actually really complements the flavors of the dish. So with that, we're just going to plate those like so. And last but not least, just a bit of garnish on the top. And what I'm garnishing with is just a simple sprig of mint, and I could probably add also a bit of wedges to this plate. So remember, kebabs, as I said, a very, very good option if you're looking at giving a very light appetizer just before dinner. If you're having guests over and you're looking at a very light meal, you can actually be able to just serve kebabs and just give an array of accompaniments which can actually accompaniment the dish. I would normally serve that with a nice glass of Shiraz or just a beautiful dry red wine. Really complements it. And yeah, with all said and done, I think you're all going to be able to do this dish yourselves at home. As I said, very easy to follow. It has been a pleasure being with you today. My name is Chef Andy and I have been your host. You have been watching Dinner Guide, and I do always recommend, do check out our Facebook page, do check out our links, leave your comments, leave your inquiries, leave any questions there, and we will get back to you. From my end and from the studios, we do thank you for tuning in today, and until the next episode, have a lovely evening.